Hello and welcome back to another session of Artist Talks. I have my two guests ready. This time we have one person in the studio, the other person is on hold or rather backstage. Milo, I think you can already hear us if I'm correct. Is that
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Amazing,
You hear
amazing.
me?
Let me do a quick intro so you guys out there know who I have invited today to the stage. Thank you so much, Zara, for coming. Zara Zandieh is a filmmaker born and based in Berlin. In 2018, Zara graduated as a master's student of art and media at the University of Arts Berlin. The stories told through Zara's projects are dedicated to a decolonial, queer gaze and the inclusion of post-migrant and marginalized subjects. They have received awards, grants, and fellowships. Their latest work, Octavious Visions, will premiere at the opening of the Humboldt Forum, Berlin in 2021. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited. And then remote, we have Milo waiting. Milo Rau is a Swiss-born theater director, writer, filmmaker, sociologist, and a world traveler. It has been said that Milo creates a unique theater that consistently blurs the boundaries between art, critical commentary, and political intervention. His pieces have repeatedly triggered controversial public debates. He has won many awards and been invited to many festivals all over the world. Milo, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I have to be honest, I've never been in a situation where I had someone in live and offline and then someone who's online, but we're gonna manage just fine. And I have you, Milo, right here and here and here and here. So
I see me everywhere. Okay.
So I'd like to start with you, Zara. Your work, Octavious Visions, I had the honor of being able to get a screener, and I think it's about 20-minute long piece. And tell me about, or tell our viewers out there, what this piece is about and what makes it unique.
So it's about, or it's inspired by the parables of Octavia E. Butler, who was an Afro-American author, visionary fiction writer. And in her books, the parables, like the parables of the talents and the parables of the sower, she predicted in the mid-90s, a lot of things which are actually happening today, or already have happened in the last years, like climate injustice or climate crisis, global warming, the rise of the right-wing populist party in the States, a president which got elected with the slogan of "Make America Great Again," and her figures are where in the parables, it's about a community which is marginalized or minoritized, and they are fleeing because of a lot of violence which is happening due to climate crisis and the whole political situation. So it's also about migration and having to escape because of war, but also war, terrorism against marginalized people, but also climate crisis. So the work I did is a video installation, which is based on or inspired by her books, and it's taking themes which she was writing about into our context today in Germany and in Europe, and also refers to the Black Lives Matter movement of last year, which got a huge boost, and and is also coming from a queer perspective. So it's also about, for example, trans women, Black trans women, and trans women of color are in the center of the work.
Thank you so much. Milo, I'd love to know, Das Neue Evangelium, is one of your productions. Tell us more about this movie. What is, or this piece, what makes it so unique?
Yeah, perhaps there's a connection to what was just told before now, that it's a film that tries to adapt this big myth of the New Testament to the world of today. So I was invited in Matera, in the capital of culture in South Italy of Europe 2019, to do whatever. And I decided to make a Jesus film because in world cinema, Matera is known as Jerusalem, because Pasolini, the Italian filmmaker, made in '64 a film there. Mel Gibson, made in 2004, I think, and I invited the actors of Gibson and of Pasolini, for example, the Jesus of Pasolini and the Holy Mary of Mel Gibson and many other actors to make the film there. But when I arrived for location scouting, I found out that this, ironically, you could say, this capital of culture was surrounded by wild refugee camps, and I decided immediately to cast the main roles with activists from these camps, people coming from all different countries, from Africa, from Romania, but also farmers from Italy, and are exploited by the big enterprises and by the mafia there. And that's why, for example, Ivan Sanier, an activist from Cameroon, who 10 years ago made the first strike against mafia, is our Jesus. And so besides these actors, we have a mix of activists and actors to not only bring the word, but also let's say the revolution, the campaign that Jesus at that time against the Roman Empire made to the European Empire of today, and to see how our church, how is the Catholic Church, how is the Italian politics, etc., reacting on it. And that's what the film is telling, the whole story about this, let's say, the making of this Jesus film in 2019.
And I think I want to get more into the situation or of your practice, how you want to include and how you do include your different voices and marginalized voices into your pieces. But I think maybe as a starter, how do you both utilize the past to maybe shape a future? I'd love to start with you, Zara.
How do we utilize the past? Mm-hmm. So I think when we look at I think if we want to be in the present and change what is happening in the present, we have to look to our history, of course, and see what has happened in the past. And history is not repeating, but there are structural moments which are repeating also, and they are also repeating in the present, but they will also in the future if we don't look at like what has happened. So to be more specific, I think, for example, colonial history is still affecting the present. So we have to look at what has happened structurally there and historically there in order to change the present, in order to also change the future. I don't know if that is exactly what you mean, but
definitely,
like, yeah.
I think the question raised to me. I saw you, Milo, nodding on the side right here, and agreeing. And I'm guessing that you are agreeing with Zara. And would you say that with your pieces, you're trying to maybe go into the structural repetition of history being repeated, or maybe these structures being repeated, and maybe contribute through your work that this will not happen again?
Yeah, it's difficult to add to what Zara said, because she perfectly expressed what is the problem of the, let's say, of the lifestyle we are all living in. You could call it a totalization of the present. Another future is not imaginable, and the past is somehow forgotten, or also traditions of resistance to what is normalized now that happened in the past are forgotten. And for me, it was quite interesting to what you said, to kind of repeat this funding story of the Middle East European civilization, or one of the funding stories, the Bible, the New Testament, in the European empire of today. And you see that, for example, the colonization of the peripheries, like South Italy in Europe, is exactly the same like the situation was in Palestine during the Roman Empire. So we didn't have to change any word. We had really the same. We could tell the same plot, just with other people. We could really land it, this past story, this myth, in reality. It was not difficult to realize it. And I think what happens when you land the past into present, that the present is changing, and you understand that the present can be changed with all the failures that every campaign and every revolution, and also the revolution of Jesus, of course, has. Because he's denied by his peer group in the end, and he's even he's crucified. And but you understand that the past is not totalized, that you can change it and you can construct another future by solidarity of, as you described, the different marginalized groups with a common aim, and you can describe, or you can symbolically even stage it in projects, this kind of revolt against the normalization of exploitation. What is neoliberalism?
So, did I understand right that solidarity is maybe a new tool of breaking the cycle?
I think, I mean, there are many problems. The problem of isolation, the problems of shame, that you think that you are the only one, and there's a whole culture of shaming. And I think solidarity gives you the power to see that you're not the only one. It somehow also liberates you by your individual standing point. Of course, it's very different because we are all paranoid to step out of our space that we defended to us. And when you go to South Italy, you understand that this slavery of the system is also slavery of the soul. So these marginalized people, and that's problematic, and it's also the same for me and for everybody listening to this or thinking about it, that the problem is that it's so difficult to imagine another system alone. Because as a slave, you don't want to change the system. Normally you want to be master too. And how can you overcome that proclamation of your soul? And I think it's only possible in solidarity that liberates us.
Do you agree with that, Zara?
I don't find solidarity a very new topic, to be honest. Like, I mean, as long as activism, I mean, I think maybe the polarization of society is changing at the moment, and also, of course, what, for example, in the feminist movement and in general in the anti-racist movement over so many years has been worked on, is now maybe getting more of a nurturing ground, or not nurturing ground, but is more understood, or is looked at, because we're living in a moment of history where we cannot. We can't ignore it anymore. I think, like I think with how the climate injustice and climate crisis is happening, it will, like, we are reaching a point where the limits are, you know, we are over the limits. Like if we want to preserve a democratic society, we need to look at the polarizations we created, right, or which were created, and I think that's why maybe voices which have been there for so many years are now heard in a different way. So I wouldn't say necessarily that solidarity is a new thing.
Right.
But I think people are more and more waking up to this thing that we have to hear each other and we have to stand next to each other, and that also, I also think that this capitalistic or corporate system, which is based on greed, is not anymore functioning. And it's like, I think people are understanding that it is destroying societies, but also the planet, like the environment, so many things. So more and more people are waking up to that, I think. And that's maybe creating a different kind of solidarity, because solidarity as a concept, or like it was there already before, like.
So you're saying, I'm trying to come back to the works that you do, and maybe this might be a very basic question, but it is something that I ask myself multiple times. Is both of you, Milo and you, Zara, you try to include voices that are and stories and narratives that are normally marginalized, normally overseen, overheard. But how do you know which voices are there if they are systematically and structurally overheard? So how do you know how do you make sure you really do include all the voices? Or is that something that is not even possible? Is that even something that is realistic?
I would say, Milo, go first. I just answered the last question, so
Milo, do you mind going first?
I don't know where to look.
Of course I can. Thank you, Zara. Of course you can't. You don't know. A project is never big enough that it would include everybody, because then it would be a project of the whole humanity. What I somehow try to do is take a lot of time. For example, let's say the new gospel project, das neue Evangelium, which we addressed before. You need at least a year to have a kind of a minimal basis in the trade unionist movement of South Italy, in the NGO movement, in the movement of the activists living in the camps, in the church. So it needs a lot of time And of course, then for me, but this is my way of proceeding, a myth helps. That you have a kind of a choice that was made by the Bible, and you would ask, who would Jesus today? Who would be his apostles? Are they perhaps female? Are they Muslims, as most of them are in the film? Are they? Who is now today Pontius Pilatus, and so on? So this helps. This kind of trying to go back to another solidarity, which is not new, but it's one from the past described in a myth, or to a story that already exists. And this, for me, this retelling stories helps a lot by finding the right balance of collaborators, of people that are playing in the films, for example.
I think for me, like when I don't know, maybe it's also part of my own history and the identities I bring into this world, like that. Like I find it not very difficult to actually access. Like if I dedicate my filmmaking to make voices visible, which are usually not represented in a diverse, multiplicit kind of way, then of course I'm dedicated, to make new representations where we can find ourselves in them, like as minoritized people. Right. So for me, it's more of the I don't know, it's like the wish and the urge, because I didn't have that as a child as much as it exists now, or as a youth even, or young adult, that I see our stories being represented. So that's for me like, of course I dig then stories which are underrepresented, or which when they are represented, they are showing us ridiculous or in ways which are super stereotypical. So that's, I think that motivation already allows me to look very carefully and to not want to do the same which has been done over so many years and decades, and and to change narratives and storytelling and bring it out of this Eurocentric, maybe also white-centered, masculine, often gaze, where like in stories, for example, often if you look even in Greek mythology or like old Greek stories, like the woman figure needs to be dying in order that the male figure has a catharsis. Like all of that it's like, it's so outdated and doesn't represent the facets of what we are, So that's my motivation, I guess, or that's how I work. Like.
And I think what I'm also interested in is, so it's very honorable, right? I think a lot of us, I feel like there's this movement where we focus on including marginalized voices, and it's great that both of you do. But at the same time, I wonder, what practices do you have to challenge yourself and challenge your own privileges? And maybe I can start with you and then move over to you, Milo.
Can you say practices we have?
What practices do you have, or how do you understand the privileges that you hold? Because I'm pretty sure that all of us in this world that we move, most of us in certain contexts, we hold privileges. How do you know what privileges these are?
I think for me it comes over many years of digging these topics. Like actually, like I studied cultural studies. I was working in different NGOs before I went into like working in film and professionalizing here in this field. And I think it's the basis of understanding social justice or social injustice to look also, and also feminism actually, like also Black feminism, also all the social movements and also the queer struggle. There was a lot in history in civil rights movements where people were like looking for their own privileges and their own accesses, and how they can like be aware of them and change things by using their privileges for others who don't have those privileges. So for me, it's very much related to being really educated in like kind of also work which was dealing with social injustice before I became like, or before I started to put that all into art. And that made me aware of my privileges. And of course, it's not a finished process. We are like all the time, we enter new spaces and new communities, and then we are differently privileged than before. Like I'm maybe differently privileged here than I would be in another country. Of course, like this is it's normal, and or it's connected to what structural injustice or structures in general exist in that society.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
Milo, what I wonder is oftentimes, or most of your work, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, oftentimes happens in the global south. And did you ever feel like, or did you ever find yourself in a position where you felt like, dang, I think this is some white savior thing that I'm doing? Did you ever have that kind of moment?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's more a collaboration of different cultures and different countries. I mean, most of the time I'm working actually in Europe, but for example, let's take the Congo Tribunal project, which we do together with activists and lawyers in the Congo. And of course, sometimes it makes it super difficult. The fact that you are, what Zara said, that your privilege is something that you try to use in a way that it was not used for several thousand years. And this is very difficult because yourself, again, and everybody around you is at many moments not prepared to solidarity, to art. I think at many moments we can't even imagine solidarity because we grew up in systems of complete exploitation, and we are all somehow paranoid. And I think the only thing you can do is find people, find groups, find collectives, really to ground over years, what Zara described with NGOs, etc., really working together with the people that knows to do, and use your privilege to make it sometimes happen, and sometimes it doesn't work. And at one moment also Congo Tribunal as an example, it became an independent, it goes on since 10 years, it became now an independent tribunal, more or less an institution, and we don't have any influence anymore. We have tomorrow, by the way, a discussion with the two leaders of the Congo Tribunal.
I see the signal is missing. Until Milo comes back, I'll just head over to you. So from what I know from your work and Milo's work, you're both attempting to ignite curiosity rather than sending a clear image and being like, this is what you should be doing. And what I'd love to know is there or are there burning questions that your work left on yourself? Things where you feel like, dang, I'm doing this to maybe give an answer, but actually it's like just creating more questions in my own head.
I can't tell you a specific question or something, but this, making art or films is in a way for me like going on a journey. So often, even if you have okay, that's where my end would be or where I want to lead it to, you don't know how you will get there, and it changes. Like sometimes you are left with open questions for sure, or sometimes you are like, like it's also very limited. You can't always of course you can't put everything into one piece. Sometimes it's like, okay, I wanted also to talk about this, but it's not possible because it would be, I don't know, an 8-hour film project or something. So I think I'm pretty okay with. I'm really happy if it happens that people go out with questions, even if it's my own questions. Like I don't answer them because I can't answer them often as well. Like or I don't find. Words are also very limited often. No, you can say like this is the answer, but then you get another inspiration from somewhere, or like you have a discussion with somebody and then you think in a different way about something. So it's not even
just like we talked a moment ago, because
it's not a definition. You know, it's like an ongoing like kind of process to be in dialogue with whatever you're bringing into the world. Like kind of
true.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it about Octavious Visions. And we talked about this just earlier, how it left me with questions that even though the stories that you tell are not mine, and it's not something that not an experience I share, I was surprised how it still resonated, how the content of your work still resonated with a lot of thoughts that I had. But coming back to what Milo said, unfortunately, because of technical difficulties, well, he's not here right now with us remote anymore, but maybe he'll come back and we will be able to ask him too. But Milo mentioned how, after a certain project, it kept on going, right? So how do you measure impact? As a filmmaker, how do you know you're making an impact?
It's not an easy question to answer because what does it mean to know that you're making impact? But you can maybe feel that that you are maybe feeling that you resonate with the discourse in the time. Sometimes, for example, I feel I have done work where I felt like, ooh, the audience wasn't ready or the time wasn't ready. And then, and then you are like, okay, 10 years later, it is. Or for example, I was just digging Moonlight again for my, and I love this film. I'm speaking at the moment all the time about it with my friends. And it's like, and I recently rewatched it and saw also interviews, and the scriptwriter said that they had written the script 10 years before the movie was done, and nobody understood the film back then. Nobody understood the script back then, and the time wasn't ready. So that's something we have sometimes to face. Recently I saw an interview with Octavia Butler again, and in that interview she said that back then when she started to write visionary fiction, for example, there were only 3 Black people in the States who wrote visionary fiction or science fiction, like as she doesn't like to call it science fiction normally. And then she said that people came to her and were like, black authors or young authors came to her and were like, I didn't even know that we do that, which means that there was no, like if you don't, sometimes you need others also to do it, that you feel that, you can actually go in that direction and be understood. Maybe you want to...
Milo, can you hear me? Are you back? I'm seeing you on the screen.
I'm back. I hear you since some time, but it's difficult to let me in again, it seems.
Yes.
Sorry.
No worries. I did have a question for Zara, and let me repeat it for you. I think this is something that I'm very interested in. You mentioned your project that I think it was the Congo Tribunals, and please correct me if I'm wrong. And you mentioned how after the project, it kept on going, like independently for another 10 years. And I guess the question that I had for both of you is, how do you know as a filmmaker that you're making an impact? How do you measure that? And can you measure that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are, for me, 2 ways. And the older I get, the more I'm insisting on the very direct way that is measurable. For example, what we created in South Italy after the New Gospel, during the New Gospel, are the so-called, this campaign, the Rivolta della Dignità, the revolt of dignity, where we created houses to locate people because they are criminalized, and when you don't have papers, you can't get an address, and when you don't have an address, you can't get a paper. So to break this kind of circle of exploitation, we created houses and we housed everybody who was in the film, around 200 people for now. Or we started, for example, our Jesus is producing sustainable tomatoes in a very good distribution system. We brought these tomatoes parallel to the distribution of the film to 50 places in Germany and in Austria, now in Belgium and in Italy, and they are sold now. So, the good thing of capitalism is that capitalism is immoral. And if everybody says we want only to buy sustainable tomatoes, then capitalism will answer, then I only sell sustainable tomatoes. And I think changing structurally things is for me very important. It's a bit old style. It's really old style activism, I guess. But because so many problems are based in the legal system, in the distribution system, that changing by every project a bit the legal system, a bit the distribution system, the way you are legalized or illegalized, really with a concrete outcome of names and lists and working together with lawyers is for me became very, very important in the last 10 years.
I think what I appreciate is that you, Milo, also mentioned, working with other and collaborating. And also before, when we had our artist talk with Mariana Katsarova and Marina Rahli, we talked about how community is so important. It's not something that you can just simply buy. It's not something that you can just get into. It's something that you build up. It's something that you curate. It's something that you cultivate. So I really appreciate that. And I love hearing that, you see how your own work is making the impact. And I appreciate how, I think this is also another chapter talking about how do you know, it's the right time when you publish your work, right? What I'm curious about is, do you ever feel pessimistic that all the social, political, and economic injustices are too deeply ingrained in our social structures through a long history of aiming for white, cis male, hetero, able-bodied dominance, that these systematic repercussions cannot be dismantled no matter what we do? Do you ever have a moment where you feel pessimistic? And if yes, what do you do in these moments? Sarah, please.
I feel tired sometimes, not pessimistic.
I know, yeah.
I feel exhausted, to be honest. Sometimes I'm like, I can't. Why is it not changing faster? How can't people see it? And then you have to digest all the anger about it and whatever. So I feel tired. I don't feel pessimistic usually because I'm quite a hopeful, optimistic person, I guess. And I feel like there's a lot of really good things happening in the same time, So I see efforts which you do or other people do, Milo does, I see that initiatives in countries where, for example, I don't know, indigenous projects which are, for example, growing trees or planting trees, stuff like this. So I see the efforts in the social justice movements and where it had led us. If you think of okay, it is a very slow journey and it's a long journey, but compared to how long capitalism, for example, or the patriarchal kind of structures already exist, how long colonialism already exists in the last 50 or 60 years, we have already changed a lot as well. So that gives me, I know it is not fast enough, and I know it's that there is a lot of people who are paying the costs, but in the same time, it is changing. And I already can see people who are 10 or 20 years younger than me, for example, they already live such a different life than I had lived. So that gives me a lot of hope. And but I get tired sometimes, for sure.
Milo, you were smiling and smirking a little bit. I saw you on the screen. Tell us more. Do you ever have these pessimistic moments?
No, I couldn't agree more with what Sarah said, because it's exactly what it is. Of course, sometimes you are bored, ashamed, and it's a mix also with self-hatred, of course, and with a lot of problems you have, that you have always these conflicts, because changing is very conflictual, and I think many people doesn't know that. They imagine this as just a very beautiful process of common solidarity, but solidarity is very, very problematic sometimes. And I think it's really this when you look to the history of the last 2 or 3 generations. For example, my mother, for 3 years she couldn't vote in Switzerland, and for my daughters, I have 2 daughters. This is completely imaginable. They can't believe it anymore. And I remember I had a discussion. It seems a bit strange. When we were discussing that there will be a new chancellor in Germany soon, and I think we were talking about a male candidate, and my daughters were very shocked because they thought that only a woman can be chancellor, because they didn't know somebody else than Merkel. And I mean, it's as I said, it sounds naive and it's kind of a misunderstanding, but it shows also how fast it can change. And I think we can be positive somehow. I mean, in the middle of all the catastrophe we are in, we can still be positive.
And I guess maybe in a way it is the only way of, I guess staying optimistic or like positive is maybe the only way, the only power that we have to kind of stay put in these crazy times. So Zara, when you look at the work that you do, what do you envision for yourself? What is it that you see in your future? What would you like to have your work do? What kind of an impact? Okay, that was a very weird question. What kind of impact do you want your work to do in the future?
I don't know. I hope that it gives other people more a feeling of like they are represented in a authentic way, or in a more multi-layered way than they are. Right. I hope that it can leave audiences who have never dealt with a certain subject or, theme, that they go out and feel more that they could maybe have a dialogue about it, even if they had resistance before. I hope that, I don't know, it sounds a little cheesy, but I hope that it can build somehow bridges between polarization and the time in which we are living, because I feel that is one of the most important things we need right now to talk more and be in dialogue and we talked about this, to call people in instead of calling them out. And
maybe you can explain very briefly what that means exactly for our viewers out there.
Yeah, to criticize and take people inside the dialogue and not to just, I totally get to be angry, and I'm angry too sometimes, but to want to change something together, we need everyone. And we also need sometimes the people who created harm. We don't need to love them, we don't need to like them, but we need for a change that everyone comes together on the plate, and that on the table, and that things don't, because if we want to change, for example, violent systems, everyone in the structures needs to change things. Like it needs, for example, in Germany, in Berlin, in the Senat, in the Verwaltung, like in the administration, things need to change, and so we can, have more justice. Like there needs to be another quota, there needs to be other structures, there need to be another access. Our education system has to change. So for all that to be implanted, we need everyone to come inside, and not like, so that is what I mean by calling in instead of calling out. So I hope that my work leaves people with questions. People feel invited to see perspectives they would have never come in contact with, or lives, or individuals.
Milo, what do you envision for yourself and for the work that you do?
That's a difficult question, I think. But what I learned in the last year, when we created this School of Resistance, which is these days ongoing here in the Academy of the Arts, and where we try to connect people from all continents and all generations, and as you said, from all sides of a conflict, perhaps. Of course, what I want to install is, you could call it, and I don't want to understand it in an esoteric way, but a healing way, because, and at the same time, but also find out the system, or create together, think together about the system, and create practices of that system that doesn't need healing anymore. So I think it's and as Zara said, it's very important that you include everybody, because I was always, when I was meeting the big managers of the mining industry, for example, in Eastern Congo, I was already impressed that these people even worked in NGOs before. They were not bad people. It's really, it's a Marxistic cliche to say that it's the structures and not the people. And I think it's very important, and I don't know if I understood you well, Zara, but it's very important that in our rhetorics, we stop to shame others, we stop to exclude others, even if they are the perpetrators or whatever, that we really to try to understand that we are living in a system that produces harm, that produces perpetrators, that produces victims, and that we have to step out of the circle of victimization, of shaming, and really to find the rhetorics and practices of healing and of reform and of reconstruction. And I think this is when I can find only some methods of doing it, creating some symbolic institutions, perhaps some moments in the projects that I can find together with my collaborators. Then I'm happy. I'm happy enough.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Healing is something that just reminded me of the talk that we had yesterday with Ali Hassan. Do make sure to check the talk out. I think it's something that we all need, maybe not only healing on a personal level, but also healing on a collective level, global level, possibly. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, Milo, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zara,
Thanks.
for your time.
Thank you so much.
And have fun at the festival. Bye.
Yes, you too. And I hope I see you all soon again. Bye.